359 AD, it was Hillel II who introduced a fixed and continuous calendar to the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem, which had previously evaluated each year to determine if it should be a leap year. Hillel's calendar runs in 19-year cycles with 7 leap years each. The calendar consists of months of either 29 or 30 days, as we mentioned, which begin and end at approximately the time of the new moon phase, as 12 such months comprise a total of just 354 days. Peep this. An extra lunar month is added every 2 or 3 years so that the long-term average year length closely approximates the actual length of the solar year. They add that 13th month so that they can reckon their calendar to be closer to the solar year. That's why it's done. Isn't that interesting? The standard leap year, when they have these 7 leap years in their 19-year cycles, standard leap year is 384 days long, although it could also be 383 or 385 days. So it's hard to say there's a standardized. It's just depending on what the moon's doing and its peculiar course, right?
Interesting.
It really is. Because they make these calculations, we actually even see this prophecy, which we mentioned earlier, in the book of Jubilees. If you go to the next slide.
Jubilees 6, 23, and 24. And on the new moon of the first month, on the new moon of the fourth month, and the new moon of the seventh month, and the new moon of the 10th month, are the days of remembrance, and the days of the seasons in the 4 divisions of the year. These are written and ordained as a testimony forever. And Noah ordained them for himself as feasts for the generations forever, so that they have become thereby a memorial unto him.
That's right. Okay, so here is where a lot of people, I've seen people many times say, what do you mean? Jubilees also teaches a lunar calendar with the months dependent on the phase of the moon, because right there it says new moon. Well, lo and behold, when you look at these manuscripts, for example, this was the R.H. Charles translation, and then when they did some work on it at the Rabbinical Hebrew lecturer at King's College, you have G.H. Box and a couple of other guys that are writing notes and talking about the manuscript. In the margins, in the footnotes for these verses in this chapter, it says, render for new moons, beginning of the month. So to me, that suggests that
Nice.
it's saying that you could translate it this way and not use the word moon at all. And it would mean what the text was implying, what the text was intentionally trying to convey by just saying, and on the beginnings of the months, or head of the month of the first month, and on the beginnings of the month of the fourth month, on the beginning of the month of the 7th month and the 10th. Those are the days of remembrance. And now when we were just looking at those calendrical scrolls, where it showed you the days of the week and the month and that pattern we were talking about, these are called the tekufa in that scroll. This is your head of the month, the days of remembrance, as we see here.
Nice.
Starting off each season.
Nice. Nice little nugget, man. That's good that you found that. I like that.
Yeah.
It's great. It's good clarification.
Good. We see this also, the same kind of thing going on in our modern American canon when you see these words, new moon, right? A lot of people see that in Numbers and in multiple places. It's in Amos, it's in Chronicles, where it's talking about this day translated into English as new moon. Well, when we look at the Strong's Concordance, or what is the actual Hebrew word for moon, for the lesser light, luminary in the sky, actual moon that we see, it's Yareach, right? And that is used 26 times in scripture, with the context always describing the moon. And then when you go down to the left at the bottom on the left here, the Hebrew word for month is Strong's 2320, and it's Kodesh. Now there's a few root words listed underneath it, whereas Kadash is a primitive root to be new, to rebuild, or to renew. Another Kadash with the vowel points in a different place is fresh, or a new thing. And then Kodesh is going to be, it says the new moon, and it says by implication a month. So these aren't always like Hebrew dictionaries. These are biblical concordances that show you the tradition of how these words have been translated in the Bible.
Yeah, there could be biases in those.
That's right.
And there tends to be a lot of times,
Yeah, there can be many times. And so we have to determine these things by context and having a fullness of understanding of all the texts available to us to help really parcel it out. And this is one of those times, unfortunately, because even in the Greek, when you see the word, it's only in Colossians 2:16, where Paul talks about, don't let anyone judge you now that you've come into covenant. Don't let the pagan nations around you judge you for what you eat and what days, Sabbaths, and new moons it says that you keep. Don't let them judge you for keeping those. But even in the meeting here, it says first of the month. And then when it looks at kind of more of an etymology and a dictionary definition of the words that were combined to make Numinia here, the new moon, as it's translated. The words just mean new and month, right? Neos meaning new, men meaning month. So you don't get the same yareach in, or the word for the moon in Greek, in either one of these Hebrew or Greek words for this head of the month day concept.
Yeah.
Whereas Kodesh is used 276 times in scripture and nearly always translated as a month, except for 20 times, which are, it's odd because those 20 times are specifically involved with descriptions of the feast days and the appointed times. And tradition has dictated that it be translated as moon. And so you have to imagine and look at the history here, because the history also helps you understand when rebellious Israel was in exile and dispersed into the land of their enemies, they were influenced by the traditions of the surrounding cultures. But no matter how you count it, if you're waiting for a phase of the moon to determine the start of your month, you don't get 364 days of consistent 12 months with 52 weeks, no matter how you slice it. What are y'all's thoughts on this?
Yeah. Well said. I agree.
I like the breakdown. I think it's great.
We see this in Jubilees, that it gives us this warning. Sean, would you read this one? Jubilees 6:36 through 37.
It says, "For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons and comes in from year to year 10 days too soon. For this reason, the years will come up on them when they will disturb the order, and make an abominable day the day of testimony, and an unclean day a feast day. And they will confound all the days, the holy with the unclean, and the unclean day with the holy. For they will go wrong as to the months and Sabbaths and feasts and jubilees."
So this is a true prophecy, was it not?
It is. Yeah, because secular observations, astronomical records, the whole of the world recognizes that a lunar year, this is Encyclopedia Britannica down on the bottom left, right? They recognize that a lunar year made of 12 synodic months or 12 cycles of lunar phases is consistently 354 days long. That verifies and corroborates with what Jubilees is saying here.
That's awesome.
In the same context, it's telling you, this is the year is supposed to be 364 days. Real quick, I've heard it said, a claim made against this passage, that it's when it says an abominable day or an unclean day, they'll try to make that a holy and set apart day. And they'll say, well, this is the day that the Lord has made. Has the Lord made any unclean day? You have to keep in mind that that word translated as unclean can often just mean common, meaning not ritually set apart, not consecrated unto the Father as a special, specific holy day. It's just a common day. And the abomination would be of making a day that he said not to be holy, trying to make that holy, making the day that he said isn't his feast day, trying to make that the feast day. That's the abomination. It's not that any day that he made by itself is an abomination, right? Would y'all agree with that?
Yeah. In this particular context, a few verses up, it's talking about them going to worship idols also. Exactly. So it was a mixture of abandoning the original calendar and then confounding it, as in they basically end up worshiping idols and making it into an abominable day. What was originally the day of testimony. So
right. So if the Sabbaths, feasts, and the holy days and pursuing holiness is important to us, then I think it's important that we heed this warning, considering all the information available to us, especially if you're somebody who holds First Enoch to be inspired scripture, right? Because we're going to see here in a second that Jubilees completely corroborates and it lines up perfectly with what Enoch says about the differences in the days belonging to the sun and the moon. So this is one of those times when translations matter. We've always said that there's no such thing as a perfect translation, and that we should compare as many as we can to determine as best as we can the original intention of a verse. And unfortunately, both the popular R.H. Charles and Lawrence translations of Enoch say something a little different and confusing here in this first verse up top, 74:10 through 11, pertaining to the excess or overplus days of the sun. But this is a translation by a scholar named Andy McCracken, and he included some corrections from the surviving manuscripts fragments found in Aramaic and Greek. And you can find this translation on bookofenoch.org. If 5 years are added together, the sun has an excess of 50 days in 5 years. For each year of the 5 years, there are 364 days, and the excess of the sun and the stars comes to 10 days. So R.H. Charles, Richard Lawrence, right here, they both, for some reason, render this 6 days per year, which isn't backed up by any other part of the text and doesn't really make sense. I tried to figure out why. there would be 6 days a year excess or
Hmm.
overplus days of the sun. I tend to lean towards the idea here that this Ethiopian manuscripts, with the corrections they made, preserves the more accurate
Hmm.
translation.
Yes, that's good, man. Thank you.
Because you're welcome.
I'm going
And
with McCracken. I mean, he's got a cool name, so I'll go. That's one of the reasons. But that makes
Yep,
way more sense because
it
I always
does.
struggled with that passage. I didn't understand the excess
Me
with
too.
that.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
excess of the sun and the stars comes to 10 days over the moon, right? In 5 years, with 10 days each year, they have an excess of 50 days, and the moon falls behind the sun and stars by 50 days in 5 years, 10 days per year. The difference between that 354 to 364
Mhm.
days. Cool. So we see it again in 1 Enoch 74:14 and verse 16, just for consolidation, that the same 10-day deficit is recorded. For the moon alone, the days in 3 years come to 1,062 days. That is 30 days behind the 364 count in 3 years. And in 5 years, it is 50 days behind. For the difference in 8 years is 80 days. And all the days that the moon is behind in 8 years is 80 days. So consistent 10 days a year. The same prophecy in Jubilees saying that if you just watch the moon and you're just going by the phases of the moon to determine your calendrical order, you're going to come up 10 days short every year. And it's all through Enoch, right? You got multiple mentions of the same mathematics.
Awesome.
Hope that helps. It's even in the Richard Lawrence 1 Enoch 78:4, it even tells you half of a year, right? Its period, the moon's period, is less than that of the sun according to the ordinance of the stars by 5 days and 1/2 year precisely. So it's pretty precise that it continues to give you the same consistent difference.
Right on, man.
That's
Cool,
pretty
cool.
great.
Yeah.
That's good.
Thank you.
That's does add some more clarity there.
This is something cool here that just shows in the first quarter moon, which is the name of one of the phases of the moon that looks like that, whereas the full moon, obviously, and then the third quarter appears that way. With the first quarter, this moon phase appears highest in the sky at the spring equinox. It appears lowest in the sky at the fall equinox, whereas the full moon appears highest in the sky at the winter solstice and appears lowest in the sky in the summer solstice. Whereas the third quarter moon, when the moon is in that phase, it appears highest in the sky at the fall equinox and appears lowest in the sky at the spring equinox. So just these facts alone prove that the moon's phase isn't the same at the same time of year every year, because sometimes it can be a first quarter moon on the fall equinox. Sometimes it can be a third quarter moon at the fall equinox.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, it lags
that
behind for sure. Yeah.
it does. Yep. So but that is one of the ways that I think you could make some sense of a verse like Psalms 104:19. He made the moon for the seasons. The sun knows the place of its setting. Some people say if you just go on in the context, it's just talking about the season, or the time of the moon is just the night, and the sun knows the place of its setting. Either way, these observations are true about when you'll see them highest and lowest at the sky, and combined with the seasonal equinoxes and solstices.
Mm,
Fun little observations. And there's one more
very cool.
talking about just how you can observe the moon. It rises between southeast and northeast. And if we consider full moon specifically, during the summer, the full moon will rise in the southeast. As we move into fall and winter, the full moon progressively rises further north. When looking out an east facing window, like I have here, a frame of a window, from mid May to mid July, summer, the moon will appear to rise to the right side of your window, but will gradually move northwards to the left of your window. This is because during a full moon phase, the moon is diametrically opposite of the sun. At midsummer, the sun rises in the northeast, and midwinter, it rises in the southeast. And so the full moon is always exactly opposite of that over the circle of the earth. So just some fun
Yeah.
little observations that have to do
Makes
with the
sense.
moon.
Makes sense. Very neat.